Hey you guys. So I'm making a video for our class today because I am not there, as you can see. We are out of town, hitting up an indoor water park in Sandusky, Ohio, which is called Kalahari. If you've ever heard of Great Wolf Lodge, it's basically the same type of thing, but it's just a big, huge room with all kinds of water slides and water roller coasters and wave pool and fun stuff like that. So I'm not with you guys, not because I don't love you, but because I love water parks more. I don't know. Anyway, this is the first video I've ever taken of myself, and I kind of hate it, and I feel weird and awkward, and I also am not a very polished teacher. So if this is going to be an unpolished recording, I also have 8 children who are somewhere doing stuff, and they might knock on this door over here while I'm teaching, and so I'll do a little pause and deal with it. And I don't know how many times I'm gonna get interrupted. I do hate it though, because one of the things I like about our class is that you can ask questions and interrupt. And I don't mean interrupt in a bad way, but interrupt like, hey, I was wondering about this, and you can ask me a question, and I like that you can do that. But unfortunately, this will be just me talking, and then hopefully we'll have a couple breaks in the midst of it for you all to discuss a little bit about some of the topics that I'm talking about. So we got up to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is the set of movies that are made by Marvel Studios, because we talked about that, X-Men, Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, those rights were sold to other movie studios before Marvel realized they could make a gob of money on their own. And so we're going to be talking about that today, and I think we'll probably go ahead and get into the DC superheroes today too, which again, I hate that I'm missing and I'd love to be there for, but I'm not. Maybe we won't. Maybe I'll wait on the DC superheroes. I don't know, I can never make up my mind about these kinds of things. So, yeah, let me pray. Father, as the students are listening to this, I pray that this would be a useful teaching to them, and that even as I can't be there to sort of interact and answer questions as we go along, that you would give me clarity as I speak, and that you would, again, open our eyes to see how every good story is pointing us to your story, the best story, the story that you've told us through all of creation and that you've told us in Jesus. So for these students, let them hear that. Let them hear that the hero of the story is not us or Batman or Iron Man or Captain America or Frodo or Harry Potter or anybody else. The hero of the story has always been Jesus, who has done what we would never do. And when we fail the test over and over again, and we choose selfishness and we choose our own kingdom, Jesus never did that, and he was always perfect, and he always made the right choices, and he was the truly only perfect hero, the one who is worthy to receive all honor and power and praise forever and ever to the very end of time. So let these stories that we talk about point us back to him. I pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen. Okay, so I don't know, because the reason, we talked about the other Marvel superheroes, but part of the reason that's the funny thing about the fact that the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they already sold off X-Men and Fantastic Four and Spider-Man before they started making their own movies, is that honestly they sold off their 3 largest franchises, which I'm sure was, a way to get money, which worked. Except now they realized they could make more money by just using their own studios, and they sold off their top 3 earning things, which is why it's funny that we have, the stuff about like Ant-Man and Doctor Strange and the Guardians of the Galaxy crew. Those were certainly in the comic book world very minor groups of people to have, and so the fact that they're the ones that are being made movies about, that they're making movies about them, is still just kind of funny to me. But the fact is they're doing it really well, and they're making gobs of money, and so I'm sure they're happy, and we enjoy their movies, so that's cool. The main franchise that's been pushing their movies is the Avengers, and so, with the last Avengers movie, again, spoilers abound, guys, so if you haven't seen some of these movies, I'm sorry, but this is the kind of class it is. I can't help but have spoilers for you. But at the end of the Avengers Age of Ultron movie, we have a new set of Avengers who have cropped up now. And so, the Avengers that we've had so far for the first two movies is probably going to be changing as the universe moves forward. But essentially we've had Iron Man, we've had Thor, Captain America, Hulk, Hawkeye, and Black Widow, right? All led by Nick Fury, kind of. So you have these group of 6 people. 4 of them really are super in some sense, or they, well, I mean, I guess that's not true. Iron Man's not super, he just has super tech, and Hawkeye's really good at shooting arrows, and he's got tech, and then, Black Widow's really the only one that's kind of like, wow, you're really impressive just on your own. So they're not all superheroes per se, but they are all people who can do incredible things. So in that sense, they're kind of superheroes, and they're all very different people. One of the things that I find interesting about the way that the Avengers thing has sort of worked itself out is that you have these people who all have very different motivations for the things that they're doing. And you find that when people do good, and I say good, maybe put the air quotes up, good, or use my claw hands. Did you see my Lego movie quote? When people do good things, they have very different reasons for why they do the good things they do. So you think about the movies, and I'm leaning on the movies here, not the comic origin stories, because the movies have altered some things along the way. But, Iron Man got his start. He had Stark Industries, which he got from his father. And, in the first movie, he's over there, and he's seeing all of his weapons being used by terrorists, and he gets held as a captive, and so has this transformation where he realizes he doesn't want to make weapons that feed terror anymore. And so he's sort of driven by this, so Tony Stark's kind of got 2 things going on at the same time. He's driven by this desire that he's seen the evil that has come from the technology that he's created. And so he, it's not really guilt, but it is a little bit like guilt, because we talked about with Spider-Man, the guilt that drives Spider-Man. And so it's a little bit like guilt. It's really just, in his mind, like trying to make recompense for what he's done. He's trying to fix or undo the bad that he's done, which is really similar to guilt. And it's again, as we talked about with guilt, it's an endless taskmaster. You can never do enough good to make up for every wrong thing that you've done, and that's true of Tony Stark too. Tony Stark also is an egomaniac. He is that right? Egomaniac. Megalomaniac. I think I'm mixing terms, but you guys know he loves himself, and he's very open with the fact that he does. And so he gets up there and they're talking about the Iron Man, and he's doing that press conference in the movie, and he says, I'm Iron Man, because he enjoys the fame that comes from it, and he's got a little bit of this hot shot mentality that he can do anything he wants. So he does good, but he also enjoys the fame and the glory that comes from being good, from doing good things for other people, which, if you take a step back and think about for a minute, is a really tainted way to do good. So one of my kids was telling me that he gets really frustrated sometimes that when he does something good, or when he's thinking about doing something good, it sometimes occurs to him that if he does it, he's going to get some kind of special reward for it. And then it taints the fact that he wanted to do something good, because then he's thinking about the reward he's going to get for it, and then he starts to feel selfish, like he'd be doing the good thing for selfish reasons. And it really upset him, because he was like, I don't want to do things for selfish reasons, but as soon as I start realizing that I'm going to get praise for it, then it taints the good thing I wanted to do in the first place. Of course, Tony Stark doesn't even have that middle filter. He enjoys the praise he gets from it. When we take a step back, whenever somebody does something good for you, but they do it for you so that you'll love them more, or so that you'll do something good for them, then it really isn't good anymore. So Tony Stark's good is very tainted. And it's an easy thing for us to do. And see, this is where I get stuck. This is my not smooth delivery. It's an easy thing for us to do good, but have tainted motives for it. And there will even be people that you see that look like they're doing really good things, and they seem to be really very good people, but the motives behind it are selfish. They're doing it because they want praise. They're doing it because they want admiration. It's one of the funny things, I think. I don't know how strong the cultural expectation of thank you cards is, but I remember being really struck by the irony of the fact that people give gifts and then expect a thank you back for it, like expect a note or maybe even reciprocation at some point, So if I went to your wedding and got you a gift, then when I get married, I expect you to come to my wedding and give me a gift. It's like, well, it's not really a gift if there are strings attached anymore. Then it's more like a bargain. That's a very strong scriptural argument, by the way. When in Romans, Paul is talking about works versus grace, and he's saying that when you work, you earn something for it. That's a transaction. That's a business transaction. And you guys understand, if you mow the lawn for a neighbor and you say, hey, I'll mow your lawn for $10, you mow their lawn and you expect to get paid $10 at the end. You didn't do it as a gift for them. You did it as a business transaction. If you mow the lawn and you get your $10, you earn the $10. That's yours. But the way grace works is grace is a gift. And so what has been given to us through the gospel, through Jesus, was given freely, and it was given to us because we couldn't earn it. There was no way we were ever going to be good enough to earn the salvation that we have through Jesus. It was a gift. It was given to us, and it was truly given with no strings attached. And that may seem a little tricky if you think about it. Well, yeah, but Jesus died for us, but now we have to live for him and obey him. Isn't that strings attached? Well, let me tell you why it's not, and let me tell you what makes it different than if I say, to one of you in the class, hey, I'm going to give you a new cell phone, a brand new, Galaxy 14, Samsung Galaxy 14 or iPhone 27. I don't know, whatever number we're on now. I give it to you and I say, I give it to you, but the only condition is that anytime I call you, you have to answer and do exactly what I tell you to do. Then you're like, this isn't really a gift anymore. It's got strings attached to it. But if I give it to you, and so you understand the idea of strings attached. What happens with Jesus is that he's given us this gift, but along with that gift of not only salvation and eternal life is also the understanding that the best thing that he can give us is himself. And the best way that he can give us joy that lasts eternally is to give us himself as king. And for the Father to give himself to us and to fill us with his Spirit. And to understand that obedience to Jesus and obedience to his commands is not supposed to be a burden. Honestly, that when we die to selves and we put others first, and we're truly not like Tony Stark, who's really selfish most of the time. When we put others first, then we find true joy. And when we die to ourselves, and like Jesus, put the needs of others before ourselves, or we look to the needs of others and not our own needs, then we're seeing true love at work. And so when Jesus has died for us, but then the sort of catch is that we now have to obey him all the time, it's because he's giving us the best gift he can give us, which is not only eternal life and salvation, but not just a free ticket that lets go do anything you want, but the true joy that comes from being in his kingdom. So I don't know if that makes sense. Might be good to talk about in a little bit when we take a pause. But so there's Tony Stark, who does good things, but usually has some kind of self-worship involved in it. Honestly, we don't know a whole lot about Black Widow or Hawkeye and their motivations for why they do what they do. And, maybe we'll find out some more. We certainly found out in the last movie that Hawkeye's got a family. But, what's his thinking? Does he leave his family because he wants to make a safer world for them? Is it for his family? And so is his ultimate goal to make sure his family's safe? Or, we don't really know what his motivations are at this point. Thor's an interesting one. I mean, I think his motivations are as muddled as all get out. But the concept of the first movie was that he was essentially just like Tony Stark, prideful and powerful, and thought he could do anything he wanted. And Odin, his father, sent him with a task to be humbled and to become worthy of Mjolnir, however you say the name of the hammer. Worthy of the hammer. I can't remember. It's weird. And, for him to learn love for others and to learn humility and, to have all of his power stripped from him to then be lowered so that he could then be worthy of the hammer. And so in a sense, it's almost like, Thor and Tony Stark have sort of similar starts, but Thor was taught that humility, had to learn what it meant to see other people and not just see himself. But his motivations for doing the good he does now, again, they're unclear. He just kind of shows up occasionally and does his cool lightning thing and his cool hammer thing and flies around, and he's cool, and he's there to help out on Earth because that's what Thor does. He also is certainly interested in protecting the helpless, and so he is a hero in that sense, and it's a good thing. But again, it's a little muddied, and then we come to Hulk. So and again, my point in saying all of this is everybody has different motivations for the good that they're doing, and sometimes it's really unclear. At the end of the day, you have this team of heroes that are all doing good, but they all have different reasons for why they're doing the good they're doing. Come to Hulk. Hulk is the one who, through gamma radiation turns into this big green monster anytime he gets upset. And so, in the first Avengers movie, he's run off by himself because he's in hiding. He's afraid of what he'll turn into, and he's afraid of the monster that's inside him. If you've heard of, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, it's this idea that he can transform and become this monster that he can't control. And I like that about Hulk, because there's a metaphor there for what Hulk is like, which is there's this monster inside us, and they wouldn't say this in the Marvel movies, of course, but there's this monster inside us, which is our own sin. It's our flesh. We've talked about this in our class before, but it's always creeping out and wanting to take control. Our flesh is always wanting to come out there and take control and be selfish and evil and self-centered. We have that battle all the time, except for Hulk. It's like a very real thing, because when it happens, he really loses control. But there's a lot about sin that's that way. Not that we ever truly lose control, but that we so fully give in to the sinful impulses, that we so give in to the temptations and the sinful cravings of our heart, that it's like we're out of control. And one of the marks of godlessness is lack of self-control and lack of self-discipline. And as you watch people descend into wickedness, most of the time there's a different type, but there's most of the time this lack of self-discipline. That's why they're angry, they're disobedient to their parents. We're talking about like 1st, 2nd Timothy, but they're wicked, they're disobedient to their parents, they are selfish, they're lustful, they're wrathful. There are all these things that go along with this lack of self-control, and that's what happens when you feed on your flesh, or feed your flesh, whichever way you want to say it, and you pursue this monster inside, is that you truly become an uncontrolled monster, and it only gets worse the more it happens. And so Bruce Banner, the Hulk, right, is in that situation where he's got this monster that he's afraid of all the time is going to come out of him. And so he lives by fear, and he wants to help out because he also realizes that so they pull him in because he's a scientist and he's really smart, which is nice that he's also really strong and really smart. A lot of them have that sort of double benefit, which seems unfair. Most people are not really smart and really strong at the same time. But superheroes they are, and so he's really smart, and so they bring him in to do that. But also, as it goes along, it seems that he has this understanding that he has this great strength, that while he's afraid of it, if he can master it, it can be used for good. So, there's the Hulk. He's doing his thing, and mainly he's afraid, but he's not afraid of other people. He's afraid of himself. And I think the lesson to take there is that we ought to be more afraid. Let me use this right. We're a lot of people. We live in a very fear-driven culture. Okay, so let's talk about America and the news reports about this new disease, or gun control, or or safety on the streets, or whether you should be out after a certain time, and just all this thing. It's just fear. It's fear. What about this big storm that's coming? What about this big snow? And everything's fear. It's fear. It's fear. But we're always afraid of things that are outside of us. Where I think Hulk hits the mark is the thing that he's most afraid of is nothing outside. It's what's inside him that he's afraid of, and he's afraid of his own wrath and his own anger. And if we were more biblical terms, he's afraid of that monster of sin in him. And while we should never be driven by fear, we should be driven by faith and trust in a God who can overcome even the scariest things and the scariest monsters, any of them. And if he can defeat Satan, and he can defeat sin, and he can defeat death, he can defeat anything. So we trust in him. But we need to understand our greatest enemy isn't really Satan. It's not our demons outside of us, though that is part of our enemies. Our greatest enemy that we have to fight is our own selves. And so I love that about Hulk, because he's he's always tormented because he's the most afraid of himself, and he's most concerned about what it is that he's going to do. And the person who goes out and is constantly afraid of everything outside of them, and never realizes that their own worst enemy is with them no matter where they go. You know, that's the idea of like monasteries and cloisters, and this idea of going to become a monk or whatever and just hiding off by yourself, and you can hide from the evils of the world. Well, the fact is you brought your own evil with you. There is no hiding from it. And so I love that lesson from Hulk. So again, different motivations for each of these characters. And then we get to Captain America, which I gave you all a teaser last week. Captain America, in the sense of his character, is my favorite. And I said the defining moment of when he proved that he was Captain America was when they're in that, army camp or whatever, and he takes a grenade and throws it. Tommy Lee Jones' character throws the grenade down, and all the other soldiers, especially the one he'd just been talking about, who's like this super soldier, super strong, does what he's told. They all run away and hide, and Steve Rogers is the only one who jumps on the grenade and tries to protect everybody else and says, "Everybody get away!" And he jumps on top of it. Because the true mark of a hero is self-sacrifice, and it's true of all of the Avengers. All the Avengers are marked because they are willing to sacrifice themselves for others. Again, their motivations many times, like I said, Tony Stark to get praise. I'm still not really sure what Thor's motivation is. Maybe Hawkeye's is to protect his family. There's a part of me that thinks the Black Widow's, not that we know a whole lot about her history from the movies, but that she's driven by guilt and shame. I think more, not so much guilt, but maybe guilt, but really shame of what she was and what she was trained to be. But you've got Steve Rogers, and he epitomizes self-sacrifice. He's the one who's ready as this little puny guy to go out and serve his country. He's the one who jumps on a grenade for everybody else. And so they take his bravery and his selflessness, and that's what I mean of all the characters. He is truly, I think in that sense, I could say he's the closest to what Jesus is, which is willing to give up all for the sake of others without hesitation. He's the one who jumps on the grenade. He's the one who jumps in. He's the one who goes into battles ready. And so I love that about Captain America. I was going to show the clip, but I'm not really savvy enough to figure out how to show a clip on here while I'm doing a video. And I thought about literally just holding up a phone right here and showing it to you, but that just felt really lame. So I've decided not to do it. And while the thing that's interesting about Captain America, in terms of all the characters, he's the flattest character of them all. They go to some movies, but he's just like the all-around good guy. And when we get to Superman, we'll find out there's a lot of truth about him as well. But he's just the all-around good guy, and you've got, Thor, who's like this semi-god type thing, who's all able to change worlds, and he's a mighty warrior. And you've got Tony Stark, who's like the playboy millionaire, does anything he wants. And you've got Ninja Assassin, Black Widow, and you've got Family Man, Hawkeye. They all have different dimensions. And Hulk, who's got this, Bruce Banner, who's got this inner turmoil going on. They're really all more interesting characters in many ways than Steve Rogers as Captain America is. So he ends up sometimes kind of being just a flat character because he's just the good guy. But the best thing about him is that he's the good guy, and he's really the best of all of them. He is, I would say, the true hero in the midst of all of them. He's the one who has loyalty and bravery and honor and self-sacrifice at the core of who he is more than anything else. And it's funny that in the Captain America movies, the first Captain America movie, he becomes Captain America because he wants to go serve his country, and then they use him to go around and do all this basically fundraising activities, and it's all about everybody trying to recognize how he is, and he becomes like this celebrity. And the last thing that Steve Rogers wanted was to be a celebrity, but what he wanted to be was a soldier and somebody who was willing to die. So in a minute we'll talk about the motivations that you see of the different characters, and I think you all should explore it. Where do you see yourselves identifying with these different characters and the way they respond to situations? Are you the one who wants to seek praise? Are you the one who is always scared? Are you scared of things outside of you? Are you scared of things inside you? Are you driven by fear? Are you driven by shame? Do you do things because you only care about those you love and you want to make sure that they're protected and safe? So we'll talk about that in a minute. And then here's what I'm wondering as we get into the Civil War movie that's coming out, and we see Captain America and Iron Man, and so there's divisions, and why I find that, what I'm curious to see what happens, because I'm not super familiar with the comic book storyline, and I don't really know where they're going in the movies, but when you take this whole group of people that all have really different motivations for what they're doing, and I'm thinking the next movie is going to explore this, it's bound to fracture. And this always happens. This is why good things eventually end up fracturing, because you come together with this common goal, and you guys may not be young enough to have seen this happen a whole lot, but you see these maybe nonprofits or really good things come along, and then they end up shattering down the road because of the different motivations that people have. So they have the same end goal, but the same reasons for why they're getting there. And so I'm wondering if that's what's happening with the Avengers. You have all these heroes. They're supposed to be fighting for the same good together, but at the end of the day, Captain America is about loyalty. And so, I know Bucky comes into this as the Winter Soldier, and so I know he's part of defending him and trying to help him. So we have this division that's going to come, and I think that makes total sense, because those 6 Avengers are really 6 very different people who come with very different expectations. Honestly, the whole plot problem of Age of Ultron was the hubris, which is a term for excessive pride of Tony Stark, and Bruce Banner was there with him to create Ultron in the first place. And the others were thinking and talking, saying, you shouldn't do this, and he went and did it anyway, and they almost splintered in that movie. And so to see this splintering come is unsurprising, and you'll find that oftentimes that you'll have people that you feel like, hey, we're on the same goal, we're on the same mission, we're working toward the same goal, but frequently if your motives for doing things are really different, then it eventually seeps out, and you eventually end up splintering over it. Is there anything else I want to say about the Marvel movies? I don't think so. So why don't you all take a little bit of time, I'm going to pause the video, take a little bit of time to talk about the characters, talk about which ones you relate to. Hey, I really relate to, maybe you relate to Ant-Man, maybe you're a thief. I hope not. But, which characters do you relate to? And you got Guardians of the Galaxy, I don't talk about them, but they're this group of misfits and anti-heroes, which, DC's answering with their Suicide Squad. Same yet different. So talk about that. Also talk about, so like I said, so explore which ones do you identify with, and where do you see your own sin struggles in the way those characters process their past and why they do the good things they do. Spend some time processing how do you taint the good things you do, because we all do it. And then also think about the team. One of the things we didn't talk about, or I didn't talk about just now, was when they came together, they were a better, stronger team because they came together. But also, like I said, they eventually splintered down the road. So think about, one of the things that's true about us is that we're saved individually, but we're also saved together. And that's why we have the church. And Paul says that the church is like a body, and that each part of the body has its own function, and you can't exist without the other parts of the body. So explore, if you have some time, how you see different people's giftings working together in your lives, maybe with your own friends. How do you see the differences and similarities between you working together to do something good? And then where have you had somebody that was a really good friend, and your different ways of thinking maybe has split your friendship and sent you different ways? Because it's probably happened to some of you by now. So yeah, let's take a pause, and then we'll come back, and I think we're going to talk about Harry Potter. Miss Will Hoyt, if you can maybe leave, I'll try to do about 10 minutes on Harry Potter. So make sure that there's just enough time to do that. Okay? Talk. All right. Hope you had a good conversation. If Miss Will Hoyt, I don't know, maybe the conversation only lasted, about 16 seconds. If so, well, you guys can just hang out when I'm done with this next section. If you don't have enough time to finish this video, then when I get there next week, we'll start off with Harry Potter. But let me make a little quick disclaimer about Harry Potter before I get very deep into into the topic, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because I know it's a sort of divisive thing, especially in Christian circles. And so some of you may have parents or maybe have come to your own convictions that you should not read or the Harry Potter books or watch the Harry Potter movies, and I have absolute respect for that, and I don't want any of you to feel like me talking about Harry Potter, the fact that in my house we really enjoy the Harry Potter books and movies, and I'm going to explain why. I have 3 of my kids reading the books right now. Some of them have seen the movies. There's a rule in my house, actually. You have to have read the entire book before you get to watch the movie of that book, and that's just because we think the books are ginormously better than the movies are, and so we insist that they read the books first. We could have a whole conversation about my preference for books over movies and how I would rather somebody read a book before they watch a movie most of the time. So anyway, so I have great respect for the position that it's a book or a movie series, book series or movie series you should stay away from. I do want to just say very briefly and try to answer a little bit the objections to it. And the main objection is that, of course, it's a whole book about witchcraft and wizardry. And on the surface of it, I absolutely agree, it is. And so if in your conscience or if your parents are where they are, then by all means, I'm not telling anyone to go out and pick up a Harry Potter book and then you need to go read it. But let me give my qualification for why I think of it as something different than what I would call what's biblically described as witchcraft. Biblically described witchcraft is what's a little bit of vague as to what it means. It is certainly pursuing power apart from God. And so in that sense, any power that you do receive from it is going to be through secret arts, and it's going to be through demons. That is the only way that's going to work. And if you ask me, should anybody pursue witchcraft or wizardry, I would say with a resounding, or I would answer with a resounding no. Do not. Don't go anywhere near that. Absolutely. And if you knew somebody that wanted to invite you to some kind of meeting of Wiccans or something, I'd say get away from there. Do not go anywhere near it. So understand, I am adamantly opposed to witchcraft because God is adamantly opposed to witchcraft, because witchcraft is a pursuit of power apart from God and in partnership with demonic spirits. It's an awful thing. So that's really clear. The reason that I say that Harry Potter is different is because Harry Potter is the stage that's set is essentially the same stage that's set for X-Men. It's a bunch of people. So you have a whole planet full of people, and there's a small set of them that have a special set of gifts and abilities that others don't. So in the X-Men world, right, there are certain people who are born with mutations. They're mutants, and so they are set apart and they have special abilities that other people don't have. And the Harry Potter world is exactly the same. They just call it magic. There are some people who are born with magic, and then there are those who aren't. And there's no going out and learning to do magic if you're not born with it. That's why I say it's very different, because in the books there's nothing about it that is a demonic pursuit. It's simply an ability that you're born with, and so it gets called magic, and so it's wizards and it's witches, but it's not at all like what I would call witchcraft in the real world, if that makes any sense.